Hello. So today we will try to create a simple registration page and use our reactive module here in Angular to display how the validators are being used and being created in a simple registration page, which is most commonly created uh, for a web application with a user interaction. So first, let's run a new terminal and create a new Angular project. So ng new um, Angular forms and validation. I would like to add routing and add CSS for it. Then let's wait a couple of minutes for the Angular to finish installing the packages. In this example, we'll basically create a registration page that will tell that the user that he needs to um, enter some data in the input fields because something will show up or a alert or an error will show up if he forgets to enter something on that input field. And also in this example, we're gonna create a custom validator that we can basically create a logic inside it and um, create a return value that will be used in our application or in our project. So the project now is successfully created, and let's open this in our integrated terminal. And first of all, we must install Bootstrap and pm install Bootstrap. And in our angular.json, we'll add a script that we always add or we always insert. So here in our scripts, let's just save this and then going to our styles.css. We also have to import this Bootstrap in order for our Bootstrap installation to be successful and used in this application. Then after creating the project and installing the Bootstrap, let's go to our app.module.ts first of all. First, in creating the validators and the forms in our registration page, we must first import the forms module here in Angular, and it's just gonna give you a hint that it's from the at Angular slash forms, and also the reactive forms module, reactive forms module. Sometimes the Visual Studio code can't detect or give suggestions for the import, so you just have to manually type it in, and then you save it. Then let's add it on our imports array forms module. And then reactive forms module. Then let's save this. Next is we just have to create a component. So ng generate component registration. Then I just tick no. Then let's just save this and close our app module.ts and here and um, let's basically start creating our HTML document in here, the registration component. So first we have to run the server ng serve while waiting for the server to run and the application bundles are still building. Okay, and now it's running on the local host 4200 and now it's opened. As you can see, it's still the default page for the Angular. So what we're going to do now is we will change this app.component .html, and we're just gonna simply add the app dash registration here, and then as you can see, now it displays the registration works. And in our registration component .html, we're gonna start with creating a container in here, and then we'll create a form and bind it onto our form group, which is called my form, and it will return us an error because we still didn't create a property here in our registration component. So what we're going to do is we go into our registration component and create a form. So for this one, it's just going to be um, my form, and let's create a form builder. It's a Angular. It's from a Angular module that gives us or basically creates a form for the user. Dot form builder dot group, and okay, it's giving us an error because we didn't inject the form builder or the form builder module in our component. So what we're going to do is we will create a constructor and we will inject here the form builder. So private form builder, then form builder. Then let's just add the imports from this. So this form builder module is from the forms that we imported here in our app.module.ts. That's why we always need to import this first so that we won't have a problem in in our app.module.ts in the future creation. So let's just save this. And inside our form builder, we will just basically create the fields or the inputs that we are asking from the user. So first of all, let's say first name, and then initially it's gonna be null, and I will leave this blank for now. This is where we will put our validators in the future parts. So first name, last name, and then it's going to be a null again, then just keep it that way for now. Email, we need the email, and then mobile, then keep it null, initially null, and then gender, and password, and password, repeat password. Okay. Now we basically created our form. So basically, the form will contain first name, last name, email, and mobile, gender, and password. Then the user will have to repeat the password in order to confirm that the registration with the password that he's using is matching. So let's just keep the validators null for now because we're gonna add something in the HTML file first. So going back to our HTML component, after creating the form group, let's create a div with a class of card, and then div with a card header, wherein we will center the text, and then it will say H5 registration. And upon checking our Google Chrome, it's basically showing us something already with a bootstrap class. Then after creating the header, after the div for the header, we will create the body of the card. So div dot card body. Then let's create a row, div dot row. Then inside the row, it will contain two inputs, basically for the first name and the last name. So we will add a column. Then we will create the first input, so label. Uh, okay, for that input, let's just keep it that way as of now. Then input, with a type of text and class of form control so that it will apply the bootstrap imports for the form control that will customize our input. And then ID is equals to first name, and form control name is equals to first name. Okay, this form control name is basically binding, or let's say holding the value for this field in our forms. So what this is gonna happen is after we input something in here, it will basically pass the data that the user inputted to our component here in our my form builder, which is the first name is going to be changed with the user input. And then after that, we're gonna create a div that will basically hold the error that we will show the user if he is missing something. So let's just keep that blank for now, but let's add a directive of ngIf, and then it's equivalent to first name dot errors dot required, and then save it. So as of now, we're experiencing the first name to have an error because it's not getting something in our registration.component.ts. Basically, that first name is a method in a way to collect the data that the form is containing. So in our component, let's create a get first name. Okay. Now it must have a return type. That's why it's showing an error. So let's get the first name from our form. So return this dot my form dot get the first name variable, and let's make it as form control so that it will return as a form control value for our get first name method. So let's just import the form control. It's also from the forms module, and save it. And then as you can see, now the ngIf directive will not display an error anymore. And it's gonna work if the input in here satisfied the required condition that it should match in our ngIf directive. So inside our ngIf directive, let's create a p tag with a style and color of red. And then let's just put something in here that says first name is required. We will save it. So as you can see, there is a accessor in our forms that will check if the value for this input is required and if it is satisfied. But in our registration that component, we didn't put some validators for our first name. So what we're going to do is we will create a validators dot let's import this first, or in our first name variable. So what we're going to do is we have to import is from our forms validators. Okay, now it's basically there already. If it's not giving you a suggestion, you can just basically type it here in our imports, and then validators dot required. This is, as you can read it, this is basically a control that will return a value if it satisfies the condition, especially focusing on the required value. So basically, you can leave that input blank. And if we check here on our web, it's basically telling that first name is required already. But if we put something in there that p tag will not show up. So what we're going to do so that it will avoid showing as soon as possible, let's add a and first name dot touched. So let's save that. And as you can see, is refresh this. By adding the first name dot touch, it will not show this div and the p tag wherein it will tell the user that the first name is required. It will basically show if you click it and you forgot to import to add something in here. Then after that, we're gonna add another validators or another div tag. So let's say div with a ng if is equals to first name dot errors again dot pattern. Then let's add a p tag in here with a style of color red so that the user will know that it's an error. First name must start with a letter. Okay. Then as you notice, this pattern validator is still not existing on our component. So what we will do is we can just basically add one in here, validators that pattern. And then we must tell the validator what pattern it will follow. So it will follow from A to Z dot to Z dot asterisk and save it. Okay. And then basically this first name, this directive ngif will check if the first name um, is starting with a letter or it just contains letters and not numbers because all, as we know, it's rare or very a very not common to see a first name with a number on it. So let's just stick to that for now. Then if we type in number in here, it will tell us that the first name must start with a letter. So that's for the first name. Let's add another column for our div that column for our last name. We can just basically copy. Let's put here label. It's gonna be for first name with a class of form dash label. Then it's going to be first name. Okay. Then after that, we can just basically copy this code and then paste it. And instead of using a first name of ID, let's just make this last name. Then change the form control into last name. And then this label is going to be the last name. It's going to be used for the last name. Then in our ngif statement, what we're going to do is we will check if there's some errors for the validator in our last name, yet the get method that we created here for the first name is not applicable for the last name because they hold or contain different values. So what we're going to do is we will create a get method here or a get function, get last name, and it will return the value of the last name in our form as form control. Then we save it. It will basically be referencing in these variables. So it's better if you make your variables much easier to access and less complicated. So let's going back to our registration HTML. So it has a validators of required. So we're gonna add a validator in our registration component in here, validators dot required. And we can also add the validators dot pattern with a pattern of that will have a pattern the same as our first name dot asterisk, and then we save it. And then after that, let's change this ngif statement into last name again. And then let's just add last name is required. Then change it to last name must start with a letter. Then going to our HTML file. So you can see it's still first name. Let's change the label first for the last name, and then going to our HTML. If we click it and then just leave it blank, it will show us the required validation. So let's add some numbers. It will basically show us this ngf directive. And then after that, and then basically the last name and first name has almost the same validators, but in the case of email, the validators for email is much more different compared to the first name and the last name. So here, let's create a div with a class of column again, save it, and we can copy a single input for that. And then instead for label, let's change this to the ID of the email. So it's going to be email address, and then for email address, then change the label for email, and the form control name should be email. Let's check our component first. Let's just copy this so that it's okay, it's email. Then in our ngif directive, we're gonna basically get the email address, and then oh, I forgot to change this into last name dot touched. Sorry. Then here, just gonna basically email uh that touch, but let's add address in here and then save it. And then let's go to our component and create a method get email address. And then it will return this dot my form that get the value for the email in our form as form control. Okay, now it's working perfectly. So this label is for the email address. It will hold a email or display an email value. The ID is email address, and then the form control name wherein this input will store its data is called email in our forms. And to check it, the email matches the email variable inside the form that we created using the form builder. And then after that, let's change this last name. Email is required and save it. And then as you can see, it's basically displaying three inputs. So let's just click it, and it's having some problems, I guess. So let's try to Control C that, Control V, and first name is required. Email is not showing because we still didn't add a validator here in our email variable in our form builder. So it's going to be required. Okay, as you can see, now it's gonna work, but we will add another validator in our email because the validators contains a specific validation for the email address. So in here, we're gonna use this email validation using our ngf directive. Let's create a div, and then it's gonna have a directive of ngf wherein the email address dot errors dot let's access the validators, which is the email, then save it, and then let's create a p tag wherein the style will have a color of red, and then it will say email is invalid. So for example, we just inserted something like this, and there is no at Yahoo. Okay. If you insert a certain domain, it's gonna basically hide the error that it's showing because it satisfies the email validation for our email. So what we're going to do now is we will add a row in here because I think I forgot to add a row. So I'll just add a div.row, then paste this so that the input for the email will show at the bottom of the first name and last name. And then it will have a margin top of 2. Okay. Now it's working perfectly fine. And well, we're now gonna create the input for our mobile number. So what we're going to do is we will create another div dot row again with a class of row and then margin top of 2 and then create a column, or maybe we can just copy and paste this if you want, but for me I'm just gonna add a column, and then for this input I'm gonna copy this first, and then let's just change this. This is now for the mobile number. So mobile number label is going to be mobile, ID is going to be mobile number, and the form control name will be the mobile here in our registration dot component, as you can see. And then let's change the ngIf statement here, wherein it's going to be mobile number dot errors is required, but it's still not existing in our component. So we will create a get mobile number method in here, and which will return the value of the mobile number in our forms mobile as a form control. Then save it. Now the errors is gone. Let's just change this to mobile is required. Okay, but as you can see, I can still insert like text in here that basically um will not give give an error. So what we're going to do in here in our mobile, we will add the validators of required, then validators for pattern again. We will specify the pattern that we're going to use. So okay, and then for the pattern, it's going to be the first 10 digits or 0 to 9, then save it. As you can see, the pattern is added. So we're gonna create a new div again. So instead of required, just change this to pattern to match our validator in here, in our mobile variable in our form. Then let's change this now that mobile is not valid. Then let's go to our web. Then if we insert something in here, it's basically still showing me something, but let me check it first. Mobile number dot errors, get mobile as form controls, required, ngif, pattern, mobile numbers, it's form control name, mobile, it's all good in here. This mobile number that errors that required, save that for mobile number. Okay, now it's showing. I just forgot to save it, I guess. Okay. Oh, here. Okay, sorry. I missed this. So it's gonna be mobile number. And then let's just remove this pattern in here. This in the touch in our pattern. And then let's just try. Okay, mobile is required. And then if we insert some letters, the mobile number will basically display a mobile is not valid value for mobile. And we can still add another validator for this. So in here, let's just create a validators dot minimum length, let's say 5, and then add a comma. And then in our HTML document, we can add another ngIf directive wherein it will check if the minimum length is satisfied. Mobile is too short. Mobile number. Mobile number, and here it's gonna be mobile number again. Then we save it. Then it's gonna basically show us that the mobile number is too short. So if it exceeds the, or if it matches the minimum length, so it's gonna be okay. It will not display anything. And then after creating the mobile number, let's now proceed to creating our gender input. So we're gonna create a new row, a new column, div dot column, and save it. And let's just basically copy the first input in here, wherein it will basically show us something. So let's just basically copy this and then paste it here. I guess there's something wrong with my keyboard. Okay, now it's okay. Then its label is going to be for gender, and then form label, then the title is going to be gender, and the input text, form control, and this one, the ID is going to be gender, and the form control name is going to be gender, and the ngIf is going to access the gender get method. So let's go in here and get gender, return this dot my form dot get gender variable as form control, and we will save that. And then going back to our HTML document, the errors is now not showing. So let's create a gender dot touch, and it's just basically show here that gender is required. Okay, so instead of input type, this is going to be radio. Then the value for this, we will add a value for the radio button is equals to m. The ID is, let's say, male, and save it. And then the label, let's just adjust that and put it at the bottom. And let's erase this space and then for male. And what we're going to do next is we create a input for our female radio button, and then the value is f. Let's add female for the ID, then let's add a for female, then let's just change this to female, and then we will save it and check our the input type radio, then it will have a class of check dash input, then same goes in here. So instead of form control, this will have a check input. Now as you can see, it's now clickable, but this error will basically not show if the um, the line of code is perfectly um, working fine, because you can't basically untick this radio button in this example. And for that, we're gonna contain this input for the male into a div, then paste it so that it will look better. And then let's just copy that and create a div tag and paste it. And let's just format our document so that it's gonna be much more presentable to look at. And then now you can see that it's much more good to look at. And then in our div, let's just add a class of form dash check form dash check inline, and let's basically copy this and add it to our female radio button, and then save it. Okay, now it's looking better. Okay, then after that, after containing the radio buttons inside a div, what we're going to do now is we will create another row for our password, and then Maybe we can still add a another div in here for the label. Div, I mean not label, for the gender word, which will have M1, and then this is going to be gender. Control save. Okay, now that's looking better. And then afterwards, after doing the gender, let's now add a div for our password. Div dot row. Then let's add a column. Div dot column, and it will have a margin at bottom of 3, and save it. And what we're going to do is we can basically copy this input. Okay, and then paste it in here. So this is now not for the mobile number. Instead, this is going to be for password with a form label called password, and the ID is form ID is going to be PWD, and the form control name is password. As you can check in our component, okay, it's password. Then in here, password, and in our methods, just create a get password method. This and it will return this dot my form dot get password value as form control, and then we will save it. And going back to our HTML, let's change this to password and save it. Let's check our UI. It's basically not showing something because we didn't add a validators in here. Dot required. And then in here, in our gender, we can still basically add validators in here, but I just find it unnecessary anymore because you can't untick this radio buttons in Bootstrap. You, you need to add another logic for it, but I'm not gonna add it in this demo. Then let's just save this component here. Okay, now the validation is working. And then after creating a password, let's create another column for our repeat password input. Then let's just save it. Now this is gonna be for repeat password, and its ID is repeat password. And then its form control name is just basically repeat password. Repeat password. And then in here, we're just gonna create a method, a get method password that will basically fetch our password for the input of confirming the password. Repeat password, return this dot my form dot get repeat password as form control, and save that component and save this here. So basically it's okay already. Then we just need to add a validator in here, wherein validators is also required. Then we will just save this, and if we check this, oh, the label is repeat password. And then let's save this and check if it's working. It's still dependent on the password because we didn't change the method for it. So let's say we click this, it's required, and it's also required. But how can you check that the passwords match? So let's say, for example, you inserted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then in here you just like inserted 1, 2, 3. So it's not showing any validation, and I can basically change this into password so that it's going to be much more realistic, and save this. And then as you can see, if I insert something here, now it's just like showing us dots. But for the confirmation of password, what we're going to do is we will add a TypeScript file in here in our registration component. So let's say we added a new file called password does not match.typescript, and inside our does not match custom validator, we're gonna import the form group. Okay, and then angular from angular slash forms. Let's save. We just need to save that, and we'll export a function called password does not match with a parameter called group with a type of form group, so that it will also detect the form that we created in our registration.component.ts. And then it will return a variable of key with a type of string. Then it's also going to return a boolean with respect to the key, or it will return null if the conditions are correct. Okay, then let's just save that. As you can see in here, it must return a value. So what we're going to do is we will create two constants. So let's say password group that get the password variable in our form. This password variable can be null, so we will add the question mark on it. Then constant confirm password is equals to group that get um let's check the let's check our repeat password. Okay, it's just repeat password. We can basically copy this and then let's just paste it here. It's called now repeat password. That might also be null sometimes, and we will just add the value for it. So in this variables, this get functions or get methods is dependent on your variables inside your form builder. So what you're going to do when creating in a custom validators, you should always match the variables that you're using in your custom validators um in your form builder. So after creating the variables, let's create a logic that will basically check if the password is not equal to the confirmed password. It's gonna basically return a value with a key called password mismatch, and then we'll also return a boolean value called true with respect to the key. And then if password is equal to confirmed password, we just basically return null. Then we save it. Then in our registration.component.ts, we can basically still add more a validator for our whole form builder. So as you can see, if I check it in here, this is uh, the the opening bracket and the closing bracket. So after our closing bracket, we just add a comma, then create another open and close brackets, and we just add a validator called password does not match, and we just save this. Okay, now it's basically injected in here, and the import for our custom validator is automatically imported and going to our registration.component.html. We can now basically add a new ngif for our password. Okay, let's just change this first. Password is required, and please repeat password. Please repeat password. Okay. Then after this entire inputs, let's add a validators of this instead of required. Let's just remove this, and it will basically okay, we can now basically put the password does not match in here. But what we're going to do is, instead of let me check. Okay, instead of adding this function, what we're going to do is we will access the password mismatch key if it's true in our registration.component.html. And in here, let's just add password mismatch and check if the mismatch is true. So let's save this. Upon checking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say, I think okay, it's having some problems. Let me fix it for a bit. Password mismatch. Ng if repeat dot passwords. Okay. So in our ngIf statement, we can't basically access the password mismatch in here. So what we're going to do is we will access our form, my form dot errors, and save this. So basically, what we're trying to do is in our form, we will try to get um, the key called password mismatch and check if the value is true or false. Okay, and then save this, and then upon checking, still having some problem. So password mismatch. Let's just check the spellings. Password mismatch. Okay, I added a extra letter there. Okay, so let's see. Okay, then okay, now it's showing an error. Just change this. Password does not match, and then we save this. Okay, then while we're typing it, it's basically comparing the value for this password now into the null value for the repeat password. So if I put 123, it's still not the same because this is 12345. This one is 123. But if we put 12345, it's now gonna be a match. Okay, that's how you create a custom validators here in Angular, wherein you just basically need to create your own logic with a parameter of group so that you can pass this parameter and get this form that we created, because this is also the parameter that we're going to use in order that we can access the key value for for the key in our custom validators and check what is what is its value and use that value in our logic. Okay, then after creating the confirm password, what we're going to do now is we just need to add a button after our row in here. So let's just add div dot row, and then let's just add div dot column 6, then add a div with a class of display grid, and then button with a type of submit class is equals to mm, button dash primary, and it will have a event of click with a method or function of submit. Then the label is submit. And then let's go to our TypeScript file and create the submit button. And then under this repeat password get, we're gonna basically submit this, and in our submit, if this dot password dot value is equivalent to this dot um, repeat password dot value, it's just gonna simply display an alert that will say welcome plus the first name of the user that created an account, else it's just gonna be this dot repeat password is equivalent to inline. Okay, this dot repeat password, we have to create a variable for our repeat password, or maybe we can just basically show an alert that will tell the user that his password is mismatch. Okay, and then after that, it's basically reading null values, but it doesn't do anything if this is a problem in our submit button. But if we add here, and then we'll add like numbers, or maybe we can add um another else if in here we'll say if this dot password dot value is equivalent to null, it's gonna show an alert that will say please enter password, else alert um, password mismatch, and save this, and let's see if it works. Okay, it's having conflict, but maybe let's just keep it simple for now. Let's not overthink the logic because this is just only an example. And as you can see now, the registration file is basically almost done, but this is the end part for this example. And then in here, let's try to input some uh, first name. Let's call it John Doe, and email is johndoe@gmail.com. Mobile is 091154332225, and his gender is male, and password is 12345 and 12345. Then if we click submit button, it's gonna basically display that the user's account is perfectly created because it says welcome John. So for summary, um, forms and validations here in Angular is much easier if you know how the modules work, and if you're basically familiar on how to create the variables inside the HTML documents, on how to link the inputs for the HTML document to our TypeScript file. And then basically this is going to be hard at first, but as soon as you keep on practicing or creating some projects, this will basically be easier and easier. That's it for this lecture, and see you for the next following videos. Thank you.